We just need a little fine-tuning and then get started. So this afternoon we're going to talk about a very interesting topic for you all, ladies and gentlemen. It's quite interesting because it is quite important. The taste for natural materials, the consumption of these natural materials, which are rare, scarce material like leather and skin. And there are alternatives to produce natural materials or recycled materials or new composite materials that will help bring about new solutions for the future. That's why I'm delighted to welcome Alice Touillet, textile designer, and also Renaud Berthereau from Studio Briand and Berthereau. We just opened this new library called Ici, Boulevard Poissonnière in Paris. François Saint-Saëns, managing atelier de Paris, is also very famous in Paris. And Quentin Hirsinger, who's gonna speak first because he's in charge of matériaux. Beautiful place. Brazilians always go there when it comes to Paris, by the way. Last time we saw that Brad Pitt spent 4 hours with Mr. Hirsinger, not because he liked him, but because there are so many samples to find at materials. When I called you, you said, okay, I'll come, but I have a few things to tell you, so please tell us. Is that what I said? Well, I shouldn't have told you about Brad Pitt, but anyway. I'm in charge of matériaux, which is like a library of materials, if you like. Our job is quite simple. We want to identify the word throughout materials produced, but materials that are quite unusual, quite singular, all kind of materials for all kind of applications. And then we have a database where data are collected about these materials. And of course, there are several showrooms where we can show you samples. So I responded to your invitation a few weeks ago because today there is still something that is quite amazing to me. People, designers, creators of all kinds come to the showroom and they have kind of fantasy that would be, okay, there should be a place somewhere where you can find the eco materials, biomaterials. So they want to be indicated where to find these eco materials, and I've been repeating it over and over. It made sense in the beginning, but 8 years down the road, after this library has been created, I'm still amazed to need to explain that things are a bit more complex. You don't have the good materials on the one hand side, which is not natural vegetable materials, and on the other hand side, you have the bad materials that needs to disappear, like polymers. Biopolymers somehow are still considered as bad materials because they're chemical materials. It's kind of weird. So that's the first thing that I'm really that I was interested in when receiving your email. And it may be trendy, but there are also some people coming to me, and I'm really taken aback. They tell me, do you have vegan leather? And I think, that's a concept that I love, but it's kind of a contradiction. Either it's leather and it cannot be vegan, or it's vegan and it cannot be leather. So my answer is no, I have no vegan leather. But if you are looking for alternatives to leather materials, of course you can find many solutions. We can talk about them, but vegan leather as such is a concept that just does not exist. Then when I talk with all these designers, I take the conversation further. If they need to produce, fashion products and accessories for vegan people, I do understand that they need to find leather alternatives, because someone who doesn't want to eat meat or wear leather products will try to find garment with no leather in. But in France, that only represents a couple of percent of the market. And in fact, the designer will more have a sustainable development approach rather than a vegan approach. And then it's something quite hard for me to understand. They do not want to use leather at all. Therefore, my role today is just to remind of elements that are quite blatant, quite obvious. I do not know the leather sector quite well. I'm not really interested in fashion. I'm not quite literate. But I just want to highlight some things, some elements that just make sense. Leather mostly waste from the agri-food industry. So as long as we eat meat, there will be production of waste and therefore production of leather. So if you just want to find an alternative to leather, instead of using leather in a smarter way, is something that is quite weird to me. Well, we talked about it yesterday during another roundtable. Wool. We need, we eat lamb and we need the wool, and we ban it. So we don't make the most of it because we do not have the right facilities to process wool. So that's exactly what it is about. So I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but I'm quite happy to have you here today because that's a way to clarify things. It's, to just make things clear about what people say. Yes, it is essential to me. Those people who come to me are quite honest. They're sincere. They really want to act in a better way, but I don't see them accepting how complex the situation is. Therefore, if we want to improve ourselves somehow, we have to accept that the situation is complex indeed, and that there are no good things and bad things, good materials and bad materials. It all depends on the use you make of the material. So leather is not something to include systematically, but I think we have many things to improve. So we have to further improve processes, not to damage rivers or lands, like the tanning process of chromium and other mineral elements that will be released from this process. That's of course important to act on this, but considering solutions like pineapple leather or grapes leather or apple leather, leather of course is not actual leather because it's more textiles. For apple leather, it's a coated textile with something that is not polyurethane and polyurethane plus leather wastes. Well, anyway, I'm not here to tell you if it's good or if it's bad. I'm not judging it, but you can imagine that using pineapple leather will last 3 months' time, and if you compare it with actual leather, we really need to think about all this and to try and act on the actual levers that we have. And of course, we can all agree on the need that we need to improve or to act somehow better tomorrow. So as someone who is not involved in this environment, that's my main message. But that's a good starting point. I think that's an overview for our roundtable. So designers, architects come to Quentin asking weird question. Luce, you're a textile designer, starting with ladies, and then Arnaud, Berthereau. What are the requests or particular questions from your customers just to embrace a virtuous attitude? Or do you think this is not meaningful? Even though materials are extremely important, I believe, for you as well. What do you think about this alternative to natural, non-natural materials? Well, I mainly work for architecture and interior decoration, interior design. We can hear it right, yes. So I mainly work, as I said, for architecture and interior decoration, and that's a niche market, if you like. perhaps we could have a few pictures of loose creations. I work for a studio called Dines. So that's a showroom, in fact, based in Paris, and people can come to us and they need to make an appointment. We have 3 different levels, 3 different steps. Right. So you can see a few pictures, and there are many materials that are presented, from floor coating or carpet, wooden floor, wool coating, mother of pearl, ceramics, wallpaper, amongst other things. That's for the carpets, and we work with many different artisans. So you see the wooden floors with leather or stone inclusions, skins as well. So you see, we work in a field where the customer have a direct and streamlined relationship to materials, since we work in the field of extremely luxury materials. And I still believe that I work with textile, I work with materials that were bike tires that I would cut and weave, and one of my customers asked for exactly the same results, just using leather instead. So when I graduated, I used to focus on the aesthetics and trying to recycle materials. But of course, my work was entirely handmade. But that was my option. But customers, luxury customers today, have different codes, and it's still pretty much the same in the end. We want to use with wood, with leather, silk, wool. Synthetic materials are usually banned, But in this field, in this environment of luxury, people do not care that much about the environment, about the ecology. Recently, we have developed boutique concept with very stringent specifications. We were not allowed to use a single thread of aluminium, for instance. I could use polyamide but not polyester, or the other way around, I don't remember. So you see, it's quite specific. But usually, yes, you have to abide by those codes. Is it the same for you, Arnaud? I see that you were nodding. Well, it's kind of the same for interior architecture, and we'd like to see what you do. We'd like to have images of what you do as well. Well, as for us, it's kind of similar, in fact. It's similar and it's quite opposite, because people do not come to us. I like this formula, same and opposite. But anyway, we do not come to us for luxury products, because our style and our will is to be quite streamlined, to be quite simple. And we will see the images. We like to carry out researches. You see the different environments we work in, interior decorations, architecture, pieces of furniture, or staircases in this case, you can see on the screen. You were talking about synthetic materials. So yes, we're designers, and we'd like to work with the materials, maybe materials of the future, but this was a specific fiber. But in a couple of words, one of my friends wanted to find an alternative to carbon fibers to build a boat, but it of course takes time to create boats. So I went to Bangladesh, and I was searching for an object that was meaningful, symbolic, but still simple to do. So I decided to create a stool. That's what you can see on the right-hand side, and we wanted to prove that with this burlap fiber, we could come up with something quite simple and easy to sculpt, just to see that with this fiber we could do something different from what we usually do with glass or carbon fiber. This experiment was quite successful. We received subsidies, and now this stool can be bought. So we believe that there's still a need for a revolution in the field of the furniture. It is a matter of sourcing, proper sourcing, but this fiber is much more sustainable than carbon fiber. Yeah, well, you're not telling the whole story. Even some boats were done with the Haitian fiber. Yes, the engineer was referring to travel the world, in fact. And okay, there are current political problems in Bangladesh, but still he has proved he was right. We could create resisting Hessian fiber boats with similar properties. Other examples, maybe, with other pictures? So you can see this tool. We show that this was feasible, that this could be produced. And using Hessian fiber with the different colors, natural colors, we can change the color of this tool. And taking this even further, this is a workshop together with the GC Deco, and for instance, we could create larger scale products. That would be a roof or bathtub, for instance. So even before talking about the fibers, we were talking about customers. Our role, I believe, as designers is to support them in their approach, to listen to them. Why do you want to use leather or something else? Don't you think that you can use other luxury materials? And is luxury only about reproducing things that have been done already? Well, a previous speaker used to explain that what mattered most in his previous experience in Japan. He said, well, what matters in Japan is what is extremely light. With leather, you have an idea of density, but with bamboo, it's quite great because people think that it looks just like leather. But this idea of lightness is something that is definitely enshrined in the local culture. So how do you educate your customers? Well, I'd like to know what Luce thinks about it, but it's never simple. It all depends on who you work with. But smart people will always understand that common sense is not what they necessarily have in mind originally. Finding the material that match their desires. You have to give them an overview. It's about the use of the object. It's about the pricing as well. It all depends on what Luce thinks as well. Well, educating customers is something I gave up on with our luxury customers because I work on a niche market. I don't think it's typical. Yes, I hear you right, but you all have your specificities. Well, Gilles, about this idea of educating customers, I recently got angry with journalists. I had received an article about a major Italian coach manufacturer who had worked with a French designer, and they were drumming up about a coach which is used with apple leather. I know that the designer in question has not embraced an eco-responsible approach. I know that the manufacturer is not fooling himself. They know they would not revolutionize the whole world with that apple leather. They know it, but they do it. And if they do it, it's because you and I see this as something better. It's better than what we used to do. We're protecting the planet. Listening to the journalist, I thought that if I bought this couch, I would save the planet. So at some point, the consumers need to be educated. That's the only way to go. But if we just claim that it is a mistake, and if we realize it, then we have a different attitude. Well, I think the best way to convince them is to give them the will and to show them beautiful results. Yes, emotions and desire is the way to make things change. I will not pretend to go meet a customer saying, well, no, wait a minute. That's your brand signature, but let me show you something else. Of course not. For sure.
At Dinas, when we do development cut to measure, ready to wear for customers, we always concentrate and deliver to his expectations, and our educational effort consists in explaining what we do, how we can do it, to lead him through a visit of our manufacturing facilities, to explain how much time it takes, the cost involved, the environmental impact. That's what we do. What you said is interesting, because in fact people want premium luxury products are not very environmentally friendly. Don't care, right? Rejecting a given material when it can be the only solution, you need to get an overview. It's always difficult. That's why designers are so important in our reflection process, whether they are industrialists or not, any other player, in order to have a wide, broad overview on this issue. People believe they're going to save the planet if they buy this or that. It's not our planet. Well, the planet will keep turning. The world, you know, we got rid of dinosaurs. Maybe we will get rid of leather, and we'll survive the leather. Young designers, Françoise, you have in your team a lot of young designers in your incubators. Is there any type of emerging fashion? Is there any type of research to use eco-responsible material? Or what about alternative materials? The answer is yes, and that's for sure if I look at over the last 10 years, because this incubator has been around 12 years. That has been a major change that took place, this awareness for all designers in all fields, jewelry, fashion, home furnishing, yes. We have a high degree of information. We are aware in jewelry in terms of gold mining, textile process and dyes. It's absolutely damaging for the environment, and in fact general public education is on top of our list, because the customers are essential actors to develop things. You talked about niche customers. Let me talk about mass products in terms of ready to wear. In fact, I have a few figures to show you. Could we see a study, not from Atelier de Paris, it's a study that was made by somebody else, showing the growing awareness of the general public regarding sourcing, regarding the material that are used. And the question mark, frequent question mark from general public, how products been chosen, where they come from, and so on and so forth, and how they're used. That's obvious. All this is quite interesting. What I was saying, I was not trying to say that apple leather is not good, but it's not the best solution always. I agree with you on wool. The problem with wool today is that people buy wool cheaper than the cost of sharing the wool from the back of sheeps. Those are 67% of customers want to get more information on the material used. 59% want more information on garment making, garment industry, how garment is made. It's not a tidal wave. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of education. We feel something is happening, and designers provide a number of solutions, and they suggest recycled fibers, recycled fabric, or the so-called vegan material. So let's go on. I've presented a few brands using this type of materials, recycled, collecting hemp and flax materials to obtain textile materials which are based on already used or second-hand material. We cannot say that these brands are yet very successful in economic terms. It's very complex. It's only starting. What is crazy today is that these companies are emerging startups, and they have done a lot of R&D work that a lot of large garment or fabric companies are not doing, and they have done the R&D. During a previous Avantex show discussion, a number of Dutch friends or colleagues said that the companies were supposed to do the research work, the private companies. It's quite comfortable for large companies to let small companies and startups that come to see us, who have little money to invest, who have problems to raise the money to do this type of research. Nevertheless, they try their best to sell their products. There's a company called Varian using flax wastes of flax used fashion to manufacture the composite material you're aware of. In the construction industry, they have a lot of problems. They have to invest a lot in this research effort. It's complex. They have their chairman did find a number of financial partners, but it remains very complex. I don't know what you're going to say about Extensel, about Tencel. My role, my part here, frankly, is I know you, Gilles. I know what you're going to say. But I didn't come here to say this is good and this is ugly and bad. To return to what you said, Françoise, that's something we all see. We are all aware of this today. That's the proof of it. If we get daily requests, this idea is, where are the good material? Now, consumers want more and more to get more information what it's made of. But if in the background there is not the right training to avoid people having, to lead people to have more virtuous desires. That's why I'm joking on your viewpoint on Tencel, because we get some information on new materials called green, very green material, and when you look at what it's made of, if you look at organic cotton, we know that cotton is a plant wasting large quantities on water. So when it's called organic or green cotton, it's a joke, you know. For material, we should never talk about organic or green material. By definition, it's a joke. I can show you a polymer coming from oil polluting that cannot be recycled. There is no recycle network. It's a real bad material for packaging. But if you use it for the Olympic swimming pool in Beijing, it's probably the best pollution for a swimming pool. And when you get a description from the industrialist saying it's an organic material, you have to turn away because it's total bullshit, or it's produced by somebody who is not aware of anything. Let me return to that. It's the function and the end use. We have met specialists of polyester from India. There is no alternative to polyester coming from based on oil-based products. We have to agree with him because his polyester was very useful and an end use, and there is no other product to replace it. So some things are quite smart because sometimes you can find the wonderful polyester coming from Vortex, so there is no question about its Niake or this type of thing. Sometimes we are biased. When we said there is no large company doing R&D work, IKEA, they do R&D at their own level. Maybe they could do more, but they have just developed composite panels and chairs. I don't know how much recycled material, but they claim they are using recycled materials and mold in their molds. In their molds, they have tables that are screw-free. No screw. There is a real reflection in the background. The example of IKEA is quite interesting. I'm sorry to see a number of people who are professional designers who have a real power to change things, but they lack the right culture to do the right thing. It's funny that you give us the example of IKEA, because 15 years I was part of a round table where there was the sustainable development at IKEA, and he was telling us that when IKEA has decided to go sustainable, being aware of their impact, that decided to invest heavily, not only good posters to say how green they were, but to say we are using non-aldehyde panels. They have started thinking at their real impact. Another company, Ferrari, is a large company. Simply, over the last 30 years, they've been doing sustainable development. Over the last 30 years, they said, how can we make sure that the material have less impact on their development? And they've won the Olympic game market in London when the standards claimed that no PVC was to be used. They introduced their own PVC. They succeeded because they have a real culture. They won the market. They were able to prove that the product, their PVC was bad, was the only tentative solution. Romain, the boss of Ferrari, explained how the market went. He told us it was the only material they could use. Through this material they could turn the stadium in London, they could turn it into a housing precinct. It was state for those are beautiful examples. It's not a negligible example. Now we have to go on. We have never heard about leather, apple leather before. Also, leather made from grape must. This is apple leather to work on this range of clothing, of apparel. It's quite interesting. Apple leather. I have nothing against apple leather, believe me. It's quite interesting is to look at these young emerging brands. They're working on patterns, zero waste, working on material sourcing, recycling, so on and so forth, and building a new economic approach to this new industry. Congratulations. I think they are setting for us a fine example to follow. I think fashion is very much ahead in terms, they're very open to so-called social development, and it's quite flabbergasting to see these young emerging brands working on all this. We can see other key aspects such as short circuits, short cycles that new brands love, and a lot of French designers are producing again limited size collections and the choice of premium or bonne facture designers, and they have chosen to work only with French suppliers using French-made products only. I don't want to say we want to turn away from foreign products. It's not the case, but all the kilometers covered by our clothing, all the business generated by this traffic. The example of Veja, which is a Parisian brand, they have grown steadily and strongly. They have a real economic model, Veja. It's quite reassuring to see they are successful. I wanted to show you how young creators use and deal with alternative materials. I'm quite jealous because there is not very much applied approach. We've been thinking about these materials before, but in terms of interior decorating, we don't have a large diversity of solutions. You talked about frugality before. There is one interesting solution, because the best ever material would be the material you don't use. That would be probably the best possible solution, the one you turn away from. Durability. You can find real solutions in this ideal world. Solutions. Solutions is a big word. The only material you should not save on is the gray matter. You should use it all the way. The gray matter.
Mais...
No, I think you're right, but it's just that, sorry, comments I've made off mic. It depends on the industry. We all have to earn a living, and if we stop producing products, I think that would be a problem. But I think that we need to have a very sensible vision of what we do. We're talking here about the environment, and but at the same time we're trying to do our best to protect some know-how. So maybe it's not environmental conservation, but it's also about protecting something, you know. Well, I'd rather use some raw materials, some timber from Africa, than composite materials from France, Mr. Müller. Well, you know, in Germany, some time ago, a new party came into being. It was the Grünen, you know, the Green Party. But I thought it was quite odd. I mean, you can decide to put environmental protection at the top of your agenda, right? But I think that people, organizations and parties should use the right terms. And you've used the term virtuous. And I think it encompasses many things. Virtuous consumption, recycling, things like that. And I think that we can really bring people together using such words. Otherwise, it's quite negative. It sounds like punishment, which is the exact opposite of fashion. Fashion is about desire. Yes, well, you're absolutely right. Desire is the only way. You have to inspire people, because when you talk about environmental protection, you often talk about dangers and threats. But I'm not sure scaring people is the best thing. I mean, scaring people about materials, and sometimes the information given is totally out of perspective or out of context. I don't think that's the right approach. I think it's better to attract people with something positive. Well, for example, when we do development, I mean, we always use, for example, if we cannot afford marble, we won't use fake marble. And it's the same with timber, for example, or wood. I think we have to be honest with the customer. We have to be really honest about what we want to show. We have to be really honest in our craft and our work. I absolutely loathe interior designs where people use fake wood, or where they use a similar color. And if you don't have any wood, well, fine, don't choose any then. I think it's better to use materials. If you don't have the cash to buy woods, don't use any, Mr. Müller. Yes, well, and actually, some industrial materials are really good stuff. You just need to know why you use it. You know, at some point in the past, fashion used industrial materials, and I think that's interesting, and I think that's the right question. What is the right use for a material? Well, for example, we know that a lot of things are replacing fur at the moment in fashion, but that's a different story. But it doesn't mean it's more environment friendly. Yes, it's ethical, but it's extremely polluting, and it's not recyclable. Yes, it's highly polluting and cannot be recycled. Yeah, no, it's true. Yes, I don't think we should have a black and white approach. Well, I'm sorry, I'm just going to refer to other panel discussions. So, you know, I'm asked to be a facilitator of such panel discussions, and I really enjoy it because I meet a lot of people like you who produce a lot of ideas. And the problem is that the following morning, you know, I've forgotten all of it. Come on. But my point here is that all these topics are discussed together, and we create links. For example, we've talked about short supply circuits. This morning we talked about the carbon footprint, and all these needs and requirements are sort of opposite, so it creates a kind of tension. And we know that real industrial processes require 3 to 5 years. So that's the question. How can companies achieve seemingly contradictory objectives? Because we're just talking about topics in a very isolated way here. So that's also why businesses need creative profiles. We're talking a lot about sourcing, so we're talking about resources. Well, that's my personal take on the matter. Maybe I'm wrong, but there have always been solutions. Well, there are lots. For example, in Matériaux Les Bains, how many SKUs, how many product references do you have? Well, this morning before I left the business, I think we had 1,432 SKUs, no, product or reference numbers. Maybe they've removed some reference numbers. Right, so 1,400, and you have several brands as well. And and so different types of solutions. So what are the areas of application for your products? Answer. Well, I don't. I'm not always familiar with this. You know, we don't always know what the end application will be. But if I were to give you a rough assessment, it's usually people who work in architecture, fashion, packaging, in the automotive industry, cosmetics, in the luxury industry, in sports, in the consumer electronics, and also in coloring agents. Yes, absolutely, and in the food industry as well. So I don't have a comprehensive overview. But for example, if someone from a large cosmetic outfit buys our products, we note this. We note this down. And also we have interior designers who may work for this company. So their trade, their specialty is interior design, of course. But what we do, our job is to identify things that are really stand out of the rock. And do you look for things that stand out of the rocks, things that are odd? Well, I mean, Luz has been working, you know, in this very odd materials library for years. I mean, even when she was a kid, people decided to put her in this library. Answer. Well, we try to find things that you would not see in other showrooms for interior design, and we try to develop this together with customers. We really try to support customers in the development. So yes, we love it when things are a bit odd. Well, Luz, you're quite young, but what about customers today? Is it the same? Do they have the same requirements as, say, well, I don't know, 5-10 years ago? Answer. Well, no, I think I can answer this question. So if I look at customers who are my age, for example, especially interior designers and architects, I have to say they have a poor knowledge, and also they seem to intentionally forget. I mean, I would even say that they have a sort of a lack of respect for all for development work. Well, I think that my generation. I mean, you know, in part of it, you know, you can get free quotes. You have access to a lot of things free of charge. But it's not right. You know, this requires some work. Someone spends some time working on it. And you know, there's a real sense of entitlement, and it's really something that you see in a lot of firms. I mean, from firms or agencies with, you know, people my age. In architectural firms, you know, architectural firms which have been around for quite some time, there's more respect, and they are more accurate in their work. You're saying that that the standards are higher and that they have more respect. That's a good thing, isn't it? Yes, but. So you're telling me that people no longer have any respect? No, honestly, it's really something that we see. And you talked about education, and that's what we try to do. We try to educate our customers. Well, I took part in a panel discussion on the future of retailing or distribution, and the head of a shopping mall said that Amazon has given people the impression that delivery is free. You see how mindsets are changing. Today, people think that delivery has to be free. You know, for example, when you get your meal on wheels at night, you know, from Uber Eats or something like that, you know, it's all free. Samples are free as well, so it's and I also heard this from another trade show, interior design and decoration trade show, and people tell me that they have to ship a lot of samples, and about 5% of these, I mean, no, actually 95% of these samples are just thrown away. people do not return them to the store, to the company. And so you can't charge people for a quote. Well, the problem is that when you take some samples, you don't know whether you're going to use them immediately. In my firm, for example, I ask people who do some materials intelligence to store or to stockpile on some samples for things that could be interesting going forward. Now, of course, if one of your colleagues gets 20 samples which are going to be of no use at all for your work, I don't know what to say. But you need samples because you need to present them to customers. You can't just say to a customer, trust me, you'll see it looks great. You need to show something. Well, previously I was in charge of materials at Jean-Michel Villemotte. And it was exactly the same. We were trying to get a feel of the market. And so we asked for samples that would correspond to the brand and the image of the company. And sometimes I would harass companies for some metal samples. The problem is that we wouldn't use them for 3 years. So, but it's true. We thought we were almighty at the time in our company, and we thought, well, we are fully entitled to ask businesses to give us some samples. They shouldn't complain. I mean, they cannot complain. Well, I don't know whether it's polite or impolite, but you're talking here about industrial materials. But, for example, we had some designers who visited us recently to have a look at hand-woven samples. You cannot just give samples like this. It's quite obviously. But some people demand these samples, and we have to tell them, well, I'm sorry, we can't give you our samples. Well, yes, it's all about the value of work. And you talked about traceability earlier on. And I think that know-how is very important. Yes, it is. But people no longer, understand the value of things. For example, if you take a coat, you know that a €30 coat at H&M. It's not the actual price of a coat, but what should be the fair price or the right price for a coat? You can find a coat at Carol for €300. Or another coat from a major brand, €1,000. But what is the right price for a coat, considering that all these businesses get a margin on it? Well, we know a company that makes handbags from recycled material. I think it's pineapple, cork, bamboo. And they sell their products €100. And someone said to him, well, if you had Chanel on it, we would buy it €2,000. So you see. But it's very interesting to have this chat with you, folks. Unfortunately, it's nearly 4:15. It's 4:15, so we have to stop here. Any of our listeners is interested in asking questions to our eminent and distinguished panelists? Did you have a question? Please, shoot. Tell us who you are first, introduce yourself, and please tell us what you do for a living. Hello, my name is Edouard Lecobica. I'm also a stylist, consultant, and a creator. And I'm setting up my business. I'm starting a new company. And so I gathered that you make wood. Well, we don't make. We design products. Oh, sorry, I arrived too late, I guess. And do you design everything? We design furniture, and we work on the interior design. Do you also do fashion accessories? No. Well, we just designed one hat. Well, I think the lady, I think the gentleman is saying that the Françoise Sins does this type of things. Oh, no, I was thinking about making a suitcase. Yes, that would be a wooden suitcase. Because you can get this sort of things on the market.
voulez-vous baliser en bois? Vous voulez lancer une ligne de balise en bois ou c'est...
Oui, parce qu'en fait,
Yes, because today, I mean, at the moment, I'm a designer and advisor, and I'd like to start my own brand, release it on the market in 1 year from now. Something. I'd like to create something. I mean, a luxury and organic brand. It's interesting what this gentleman is saying. You have two cards. Let me take one of you. You see, these are beautiful cards, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the gentleman's question is really interesting. So, for example, the gentleman would like to make something, I mean, a luxury product, and he'd like to make something out of wood. Some people would think it's contradictory, but I think it's extremely interesting. If you think about what we said earlier on, you seem to have some reservations about this wooden suitcase, but yes, it needs some wheels. There are many different solutions for this, but that's a different story. But wood is a fascinating material, I believe. Especially if you look at all the innovation potential, you can get some celluloses from it and many other things. You can shape wood in many different ways. But to us, we don't think this way. Like polymer is innovative and wood is traditional. But you can have wood foam, you can have also wood that is more flexible than any other material. So whatever the type of material you think about, there are a lot of possibilities in terms of innovation. Well, thanks very much, Quentin. It's a great innovation. Please, next time, can you please write down matériaux with the apostrophe? Every time. God, you're such a nasty bloke. So, Mr. Quentin with an apostrophe. Age apostrophe. Anyway, great talking to you. Ladies, thanks very much. Lads, boys, thank you very much. And we have another question, madam.
yes.
I would like to have a little bit more discussion about mass production, because for me you made a very interesting statement, and that was about the fact that it's not necessarily only about what is the material, but how we're using the material. So for me, for example, I started working recently with a company who was producing a lot of leather clothing in mass for H&M. They provide everything for Zara. But now they are trying to change to more intelligent manufacturing. So that means we have very high quality products, but they're not produced in mass. They're produced sur commande. So it's really for the specific person. And so it's interesting to me that you look at leather and you think it is something as not very ecolo, but at the same time it's natural. Fake leather is plastic. And here you're trying to not produce everything in thousands of pieces, of which half are going to get thrown away, but very, per command. So I'd like a little bit more discussion on your thoughts about movements towards less mass production, more intelligent manufacturing, and how that's impacting. Merci. On peut répondre en français.
On va répondre en français.
Nous,
I could have two answers. As a furniture designer, we are often confronted to mass production. By confronted, I mean, it all depends. So you have mass production for plastic. So these companies have to ask the right questions about materials and the supply of these materials. They have, and they are asking and wondering why they don't sell as much as they used to, especially plastics, because the plastic market is again, it's growing, but plastic can be cheap, but the quality has to be good, so the price is going to be higher, but you might have a beautiful plastic object that you want in your own home. I don't know if I can give you an answer about mass production. We love to manufacture ready to measure when we manufacture interior decoration objects, because when you do that in unique pieces, that's how you take the example of metal shelves, and you make the difference between mass production and what we do, and we find a balance in order to come up to have a good cost effectiveness between the quality of the product, the aspect of the product. There's no microphone, no microphone. Now, maybe I did not answer your question. I understand your question because I was not wearing a headset. I did not understand your question. As a matter of fact, you expressed the conclusion we have reached. We don't want to know what type of material. We want to have a closer reflection at the production, manufacturing, and the distribution circuit, and not only focus on the material, but to have an overall vision, a general vision, in order to be more efficient in terms of production with what type of material. It's one conclusion among others of what comes out of our discussion around table. Not to be in a black or white discussion. Synthetic is bad and biodegradable fabric is good. But I think we have to look at the production process. We have made a hat. We made 300 of these hats for Mont Saint-Michel resort. It shows that we have more and more emerging brands manufacturing products in very low volumes, only 200 coats, 300 caps or hats. It's quite smart. I love garments. I know I'm going to buy a new one in a few years. I don't want to buy expensive clothing or a piece of clothing. I don't want to buy it when it's too cheap. When you have an average margin, you can have average production in terms of quantity. I know I'm quite careful with that, sensitive to that. I'm not in the fashion industry. I'm quite sensitive to what brands do. With the new laws which ban to throw away or to destroy fashion waste, now brands have to find new ways to avoid mass production, so they will have to cut down on their waste. We have shown new technologies to meet and to find an answer to wastes, fashion waste, in order to have sufficient inventory to meet the requests from distribution without having to manage stock that you won't be able to destroy. And you can use other technologies, digital technologies allowed to do that. Models are processed quite rapidly, and it's proximity sourcing. You need to have close sourcing. Does that answer your question more or less? Thank you very much. Any other question?
Vous êtes, monsieur?
My name is Freddy.
Pour l'instant, je suis stagiaire.
I'm an intern in the fashion industry, and I've just joined the fashion industry that has recently used apple leather. And you mentioned apple leather and other materials. I'd like to know if the design process, if it's environmentally friendly. Apple leather. Who wants to talk about leather, apple leather? We talked about it before. People mix up things. Leather is leather, which is hide, animal skin. Apple leather comes from the natural waste. Natural waste. If we talk about simile leather using apple waste, the concept is slightly different. Those are two different materials. Leather is different from apple leather. They use traditional polyurethane injection. Rather than using 100% polyurethane, you have 50% of juice and apple waste. Together with polyurethane, saying it's good or bad. It means you're going to be using less plastic to manufacturing juice fabric. It's quite interesting if you can use less polymer. That can be one solution. It's probably less interesting if you have a clear recycling solution, and if you design something which is not going to be in line with ecological solutions. I want to be clear about this. Apple leather is unique, but saying it's bad or good, I cannot do that. Things are more difficult, and it seems we are not going to reopen this debate we had earlier, but if you could avoid the term leather, but simile leather using apple waste is going to be more adequate as a matter of instruction, as a description of things. Thank you very much to each and every one. Congratulations. Thank you, everyone.